What do you think is the most expensive part of a luxury watch? It's not the movement, and it's certainly not the sapphire crystal or the ceramic bezel insert either. It's the name on the dial, and that name can add $500, $1,000, sometimes $10,000 to the price of a piece that shares its components with something costing a fraction of that. Strip the name off, and you're left with a question nobody in the watch industry wants you to ask. So today we've got 10 watches that cost less than $100 but should cost way more. One of these watches uses the exact same movement found inside a Seiko Prospex that retails for over $1,000. There's another watch on this list that I think is even more interesting, for a completely different reason. So, tick-tock. Number 10. Cadison C. $8,185. $100 to $120. Walk into a boutique in Geneva and tell them you want an automatic movement, a sapphire crystal, and a genuine diamond at 12 o'clock. The salesperson will smile, pull out a price tag starting at $2,000. The diamond alone, they'll explain, is a craftsmanship process. The setting, the sourcing, the prestige of the brand guarantee the stone's quality. The Cadison C 8,185 does all three for between $100 to $120. And yes, the diamond is real, tiny, about 1 millimeter across, but it passes a diamond tester, the same handheld device jewelers use to verify stones before purchase. It sits right at 12 o'clock, set into the dial of a minimalist dress watch that weighs very little and photographs considerably better than it should at this price. The Miyota automatic movement underneath runs at 21,600 beats per hour, generating that smooth, sweeping second hand that separates mechanical watches from battery-powered ones. The Miyota caliber is what micro-brands pay a premium to source. Here, it comes standard. Now, the Cadison isn't going to fool a collector. The case proportions are slightly soft at the edges, the sort of thing that shows up under a macro lens and disappears at arm's length. The bracelet has that characteristic light feel of something engineered to hit a number rather than to last 30 years. These are not surprises at between $100 to $120. But what fascinates me about this watch is not the price. It is that gap between what a diamond costs to set into a watch dial at boutique level versus what it apparently costs in Dongguan is so enormous it stops making sense. Not because the materials are different, but because the entire cost of setting the stone into a boutique watch is about the story that surrounds it. At the price point, there is no story. There's just the stone. It's clean dress watch material, first date material. The kind of piece someone notices on your wrist and quietly asks what brand it is. When you tell them the price, they won't believe you. That moment is worth something the spec sheet doesn't measure. That was a $100 to $120 surprise. The next one operates on the same principle, except it's titanium. Number 9. Bernie Titanium Field Watch, T2566M6 $7.99. Titanium is the word the watch industry uses to add a $67.99 to any price tag. Put titanium case in the spec sheet of a Swiss brand, and the number goes up before they've changed a single component. The Bernie T2566M doesn't care. It weighs under 50 grams on the wrist. That's the weight of a few coins. And unlike most sub-$100 titanium attempts, which use titanium for the case back only and steel everywhere it matters, this one is a solid titanium build throughout. The thing that makes it genuinely interesting, though, is the crystal. Bernie specifies an AR-coated sapphire, meaning there's a layer of anti-reflective treatment applied to the inside of the glass. That's usually the first thing cut when a watch brand needs to save $7 per unit. Most budget sapphire watches skip the coating entirely. The Bernie kept it. The movement is a sweeping quartz second hand. It is not mechanical, but it mimics mechanical sweep convincingly. For people who aren't deep into the hobby yet, the distinction barely registers. What registers is how the watch feels. 50 grams of titanium sitting on your wrist like almost nothing, with a sapphire that reads clean in direct sunlight. It hits like a watch that costs 3 times more, at least in the first 5 seconds of wearing it. There's a person this watch is made for, Someone who works outside with their hands and keeps destroying watches because the metal gets too heavy in summer heat, or because the bracelet catches on things and scratches everything. They need light, they need durable, and they've been told for years that titanium costs money. The Bernie T2566M is the answer to a question that person has been asking without realizing it. The finishing is where it shows its constraints. Up close, the edges are functional rather than beautiful. The dial printing is clean but not crisp. Look at it under a loupe, and the numerals have slightly soft edges compared to what you'd find at $200. That doesn't matter on the wrist. On the wrist, it reads clearly, "It sits like nothing," and it does its job without complaint. For $67.99, you're not buying beauty. You're buying the sensation of owning a titanium watch before you're ready to pay what titanium normally costs. $67.99, titanium AR sapphire. That's already two watches that shouldn't exist at this price. Number 8 is one I hesitate to put on this list because of what happened to it after people found out. Number 8, Seiko SNKL, 137 to $159, current price. I need to be straight with you about this one. The price is not currently $100 and below, but the story around it is so good that I just have to mention and tell you about it. The SNKL 23 was officially discontinued by Seiko for most markets. The listed price when you found one was around $75. Then Hodinkee wrote an article about it. The community found it, and suddenly, the same watch that collected dust on gray market eBay listings for 4 years was selling for $250. One sold for $275 shipped. One forum member described hunting for a replacement after his daily beater got damaged. He said he'd been abusing his SNKL 23 for years, wearing it everywhere, knocking it around, treating it the way a sub-$100 watch is supposed to be treated. Then he looked up the replacement price, and his jaw dropped. The same watch he'd ignored was now a grail because someone wrote 400 words about it. That is a perfect illustration of the point this whole list is making. The watch didn't change, the dial didn't get better. The Seiko 7S26 movement inside, 21 jewels, no hacking, no hand-winding, the most stripped-down automatic Seiko makes is exactly the same movement it always was. What changed was awareness. People learned what they were holding. The SNKL 23 has a pinstripe dial that Seiko engineers with the same industrial processes used on watches, costing 4 times more. The case finishing, specifically the alternating brushed and polished surfaces on the faceted case, punches into territory that should cost $250. And sometimes, right now, that's exactly what it costs. The story here isn't, buy this watch for under $100. The story is that the SNKL 23 spent years available for $75 while most buyers walked past it without a second glance. Then one article changed the market overnight. A watch community woke up and priced it correctly within weeks. If you find one under $100 now, buy it without thinking. But I won't pretend that's easy. Sometimes the market figures it out before you do. The next watch? The market still hasn't figured it out. It just sits there, underpriced, waiting. Number 7. Loris Titanium Field Watch, $59 to $120. Here is a sentence that sounds wrong. Loris is Seiko. Not inspired by Seiko. Not assembled with Seiko parts. Loris is a brand launched by the Seiko Watch Corporation in 1982 as its entry-level arm, designed to reach buyers who couldn't justify Seiko's mainline prices. Every Loris movement comes out of the same Seiko manufacturing infrastructure that produces watches costing 10 times as much. The movements carry a 2-year manufacturer's warranty. The quality control standards are Seiko's. The supply chain is Seiko's. Only the name is different. The Loris Titanium Field Watch, referencing the RXD and RG8 series models, uses a titanium case, a solid quartz Seiko movement, and 100 meters of water resistance. At some retailers, it costs less than $59, at most, around $120. The thing measures around 36 millimeters, which is compact by today's standards but appropriate for what it is. A field watch that belongs on a wrist, doing real things. The dial is genuinely elegant. A cream background with bold Arabic numerals at every hour, with their 24-hour equivalents printed in smaller text closer to center. The syringe hands, that classic sword-shaped loom carrier, are the standard field watch choice. They are chosen not because they look nice, but because they carry the most loom per hand width and are readable at 2 in the morning without a flashlight. It looks like a watch issued to someone who needed to tell time in the dark and couldn't stop to think about it. Because that's essentially what it is. Most people who buy this watch don't know they're buying a Seiko. That's the observation that sits with me. Seiko built a watch, attached a different name, priced it like it was made by a different company, and it still works exactly like Seiko made it. Because Seiko made it. There are whole product categories in the world that operate this way. Generic label pharmaceuticals that are chemically identical to branded ones. Store-brand groceries from the same factories as the premium products beside them on the shelf. The Loris is that, but for watches. And unlike the pharmaceutical or the cereal, nobody in the watch industry talks about it. That's the hidden identity play. The next watch doesn't hide what it is, it hides what it costs. Number 6. Specht & Söhne Imperial, $230 to $400. I know, it costs way more than the price range I should be talking about, but you can get it used on eBay for around $30. I know that's not new, but it's the Specht & Söhne Imperial. This watch has a similar aesthetic to the Vacheron Constantin 222. 222 is one of the most desired integrated bracelet sports watches ever made. Originally designed in 1977 by Jörg Heisek to celebrate the brand's 222nd anniversary. The 222 was the Swiss manufacturer's first sports watch with a bracelet that flowed directly into the case. Gap. No spring bar visible from the side, just one continuous object from clasp to clasp. When Vacheron revived it in 2023 as part of their Historiques collection, they brought it back in solid yellow gold. The entry price was north of $100,000. The Specht & Söhne Imperial pays homage to the 222. It takes design inspiration from the watch rather than pretending to be an original. That distinction matters legally and ethically. The integrated bracelet flows into the case the same way the 222 does. The brushed dial with its horizontal texture mirrors the original's pattern. The sapphire crystal sits under polished steel with a level of mirror finishing that takes a genuine moment to process at this price point. Independent reviewers on Watch Crunch described the bracelet as the best they'd handled for its price. This is a strong statement from a community not given to exaggeration about budget pieces. The movement is quartz, which on paper sounds like a downgrade from mechanical. But consider this. A Vacheron 222 keeping better time than a quartz watch is not guaranteed. The mechanical movement in a watch costing over $100,000 will typically run to plus or minus a few seconds per day. A quartz movement keeps time to within 15 seconds per month. Accuracy isn't what you're paying for when you buy a 222. You're paying for the bracelet engineering, the weight in hand, the name, and the sensation of belonging to a world most people never enter. The Specht & Söhne Imperial gives you everything except that last part. It gives you the design, the bracelet flow, and the visual language of something that costs $100,000. What it doesn't give you is the story that the $100,000 version carries with it everywhere it goes. But the story it tells is enough. Specht & Söhne Imperial is doing its best impression of something that costs $100,000. The next watch doesn't impersonate anything. It invented its own category. Number 5. Escapement Time Type B Flieger, $55 to $165. Most brands at this price level spend their budget on specifications. Bigger numbers on the spec sheet, more water resistance, more crystal hardness, more features. The logic is understandable. Specifications are legible at a glance. Finishing is invisible until you look closely, and most online buyers never look closely. Escapement Time did something else. They spent the budget on finishing. The Type B Flieger has a brushed and polished case that, on close inspection, shows the kind of edge definition you don't expect to find under $100. The chamfers, the angled transitions between case surfaces, are clean and consistent. That matters because chamfering is a time-consuming step in case manufacturing. Every chamfer requires a separate pass with a polishing tool and a human judgment call about the angle and pressure. Brands cut it at the low end. Escapement time kept it. The movement is a VH31 sweeping quartz, which means the second hand moves in a smooth arc rather than the tick-tick-tick you'd find in a typical battery watch. The hands are heat-blued steel, not painted blue, heat-blued, exposed to controlled temperature until the steel takes on that deep indigo color naturally. This is the same technique used in fine watchmaking for over a century, and the same technique that adds a surcharge on any watch brand transparent enough to list it. The dial is sterile, no logo in the center. The indexes are applied rather than printed, meaning they're tiny metal markers pressed onto the dial surface and polished individually, on a watch that cost $92. Honestly, I keep coming back to this one. The Escapement Time Type B is the least flashy watch on this list. It doesn't have titanium, or an NH35, or a diamond. It just has extremely good finishing for money that shouldn't produce extremely good finishing. There's a specific type of watch buyer who will pass over everything else on this list and stop here. The person who cares less about what a watch can do and more about how it looks under a lamp at 11 o'clock at night. For that person, $92 has never bought this much. That one is quiet confidence. The next watch is the opposite. It's loud Soviet engineering, and it doesn't apologize for any of it. Number 4. Vostok Amphibia, $60 to $150. There is exactly one watch under $100 with a genuine in-house movement. The mechanical soul of the watch, designed, built, and calibrated inside the same factory where the case is made, is the definition of what expensive watches cost money to achieve. When Rolex says in-house, people add $1,000 to the price in their heads without blinking. When Patek Philippe says it, they add $100,000. That watch is the Vostok Amphibia, built in Chistopol, Russia, since 1967. The Amphibia exists because the Soviet military needed a dive watch that would work under pressure without the crown popping off. Swiss watches of the era used rubber gaskets to stay waterproof. The Soviet engineers at the Chistopol watch factory took a different approach. They designed a case that tightens as water pressure increases. The crown threads at 2 o'clock rather than 3, positioned to avoid the standard pressure point. The case back compresses inward under depth. The whole mechanism becomes more waterproof the deeper it goes. Not a workaround, an invention. The 2416B caliber inside has 31 joules and a 31-hour power reserve. It will run loud. Watch collectors call the Amphibia a wrist alarm because you can hear the rotor spinning on a quiet night. The Watchnificent 2025 Buyer's Guide puts the stock accuracy at -20 to +60 seconds per day, unregulated. That is comically bad by Swiss standards and completely unimportant. Have it regulated by a local watchmaker for $30 to $50, and you'll reach 15 to 20 seconds per day. Still not Swiss. Still a real in-house automatic movement that nobody else at this price point can touch. The acrylic crystal scratches if you look at it aggressively. Yes, that is the trade-off. That has always been the trade-off. Buy a $20 replacement crystal if it bothers you, and swap it in an afternoon. But here's the thing about the Amphibia that gets missed in every spec comparison. The design is beautiful in that particular way that functional objects designed without aesthetic ambition sometimes are. The cushion case, the crown at 2 o'clock, the Scuba-Doo dial with its cartoon diver at 12 o'clock. It looks like a drawing a Soviet engineer made on a notepad in 1965 while trying to solve a waterproofing problem. It wasn't designed to be charming. That's why it's so charming. For $60 to $150, depending on where you find it, you own the only sub-$100 watch ever made where every single component, movement, water resistance engineering, Design logic was invented in one building by one team. No borrowed Swiss caliber, no licensed Japanese movement. All of it, theirs. That's not available anywhere else at this price, not even close. Soviet engineering from 1967, still holding. What comes next is Chinese engineering from right now, doing something that shouldn't work either. Number 3, Pagani Design PD, 170, $180 to $110. The Moonwatch problem. Omega's Speedmaster Professional, the watch worn on the moon in 1969, costs around $6,000 new. It has a manually wound movement, a hesylite crystal, and a tachymeter bezel. What it also has, and what makes that $6,000 feel emotionally defensible, is a chronograph hand that sweeps. Most cheap chronographs don't sweep, they tick. The second hand lurches 1 beat per second, which looks mechanical but feels like a quartz alarm. Every review of budget chronographs mentions this. It's the tell. The moment someone who knows watches sees a ticking chrono hand, the illusion collapses. The Pagani Design PD 1701 sweeps. It uses a Seiko VK63 Mecha Quartz movement. Mecha Quartz means the timekeeping is quartz. It is accurate to within 15 seconds per month, but the chronograph mechanism is driven by a physical cam and lever system, not by electronics. The result is a smooth sweep indistinguishable from a mechanical movement to the naked eye. The same effect that Breitling uses in their Super Ocean Heritage chronograph. The same effect that Longines deploys on their Conquest entry chronographs, brands that charge $400 to $800 for the privilege. Pagani Design charges $90. The crystal is sapphire. The bracelet is solid enough that most reviewers stopped replacing it after purchase, which at this price point is a meaningful compliment. Budget watch bracelets are typically the first thing to go. The dial is a clean interpretation of the Speedmaster aesthetic. Round subdials, tachymeter ring, applied indexes, no cluttered text to explain what you're looking at. Picture the person who's been wanting a Speedmaster for 3 years, but can't justify it yet. They pick up the PD 1701 and put it on. The chronograph hand sweeps. They look at the sapphire crystal in direct sunlight and see their own reflection clearly, the way expensive glass works. For $80 to $110, they got the sensation the Moonwatch sells without committing $6,000 before they know if they really love that dial layout. That's not a consolation prize. That's a test drive before the purchase. And if the test drive turns out to be everything they needed, then the $90 watch solved a $6,000 question. A Mecha Quartz sweep for $90. The next 2 watches are real automatics. Mechanical hearts, no batteries, ever. Number 2 does something with titanium that costs almost nothing and should cost much more. Number 2, Bodery Voyager, $129 to $369. The Bodery Voyager is rated to 100 meters. In the world of dive watches, that distinction is significant. But the Voyager was never a dive watch. It's a field watch, and 100 meters is the correct rating for what field watches do. I know. You caught me. Price is over $100 again. But here's what the Bodery is actually doing that makes it worth being here. It combines a solid titanium case with a Seiko NH35 automatic movement, a sapphire crystal with Swiss C, 3 Super Luminova lume, and a screw-down crown, all in a 40mm case, weighing 74 grams. For context, a comparable Hamilton khaki field, one of the most respected names in affordable tool watches, runs between $400 and $500. The Bodery hits almost every specification benchmark of that watch for a fraction of the price. The titanium here isn't decorative. The total weight on the wrist, including the NATO strap, is low enough that some wearers report forgetting they have it on. That sounds like a marketing copy until you actually wear one. The sandblasted titanium surface is matte and clean and impossible to scratch aggressively. Titanium's hardened outer layer, the result of how Seiko-grade manufacturers process the material, resists scuffing in a way polished steel never does. But there are 2 genuine weaknesses, though. The lug-to-lug, runs to 48 millimeters, which on smaller wrists creates some overhang, and the dial face at 31 millimeters reads slightly smaller than you'd expect in a 40 millimeter case. Neither of these is a flaw, so much as a trade-off. But the movement runs accurately, the lume is properly bright, and the whole package sits on your wrist asking you to take it somewhere. At $99, it's the best argument that titanium doesn't have to mean expensive. It just used to. Everything about that watch said it shouldn't exist at that price. And then there's number one, a watch that every forum, every reviewer, every collector in the sub-100 space eventually ends up discussing. The engineering anomaly at the top of this list. Before we move on to the next part, let me tell you this. Most people don't realize this, but buying a watch the wrong way can cost you thousands, and you won't even notice it until it's too late. You walk into a store or browse online, and everything looks the same, but behind the scenes, there's a system. Prices aren't always fair, availability is controlled, and one bad decision can leave you overpaying for something that doesn't even hold its value. That's why I created a complete free insider guide to buying watches. Inside, you'll find the best watches to buy, the watches to avoid, and how to choose a watch that actually fits your style and budget long term. The goal is simple. I'll help you stop guessing and start buying smart. You'll find the free guide in the pinned comment and description. Now, let's move on to the next part. Number 1. Steel Dive SD 1970, Captain Willard, $77 to $85. In 1979, Martin Sheen wore a Seiko 6105 into a river in the Philippines while filming Apocalypse Now. The character he played was Captain Willard. The watch on his wrist became one of the most recognizable timepieces in cinema, an asymmetrical cushion case with a crown at 4 o'clock, a domed unidirectional bezel, and a shape that looked grown rather than designed. In 2024, Seiko reissued the original in their Prospex line for $1,200. The Steel Dive SD 1970 costs $77 to $85, and this is where the story gets strange. The SD 1970 runs on a genuine Seiko NH35 movement, not a clone, not a derivative. The actual caliber, manufactured by Seiko Instruments and sold to watch producers who meet minimum order thresholds. 24 joules, 42 hours of power reserve, hacking seconds hand, bidirectional winding via magic lever system, operating at 21,600 beats per hour, at plus 1.2 seconds per day average. Measured by multiple reviewers on actual timegrapher equipment, it runs more accurately than its price class has any right to produce. The crystal is sapphire with a 45-degree beveled edge. The ceramic bezel insert has 120 clicks. The case back screws down. 200 meters of water resistance. And the lume, C3 green and BGW 9 blue Super Luminova, outperforms the lume on several watches at 4 times the price, including some entry-level Seiko Prospex models. This is what I have seen that nobody in the industry wants to say out loud. The difference between a Seiko Prospex priced at $1,200 and this watch at $77 to $85 is the logo on the dial, the bracelet quality, and the level of case finishing. That is it. The movement is the same movement. The crystal hardness is the same. The water resistance is the same. The lume formula is comparable or better on the Steel Dive. So what is Seiko charging $1,200 for? The name. The heritage. The right to say Prospex to someone who knows what that means. That's worth something real to a lot of people. For some collectors, it's worth every single cent. But for anyone who just wants the mechanical experience, the weight on the wrist, the sweep of a real automatic second hand, the satisfying click of a ceramic bezel at depth, the feeling of wearing something that was engineered to go places. The SD 1970 provides all of that for a price that should feel impossible. The Watch Crunch community has a running joke about this watch. I have no idea how Steel Dive makes money from it. That observation came from a reviewer who'd owned 3 of them and tried to work backwards from the cost of the components. The bill of materials should push the retail price well past $150 by any rational manufacturing analysis. The math doesn't work, and yet the watch exists, ships, and runs. Now, the flaws are real. The stamped clasp on the original V1 bracelet is the weak point of the whole package. It feels thin against the rest of the watch, and most owners swap it within 6 months for a third-party milled clasp around $30. Lume consistency varies between units. Some glow longer than others, which is a quality control issue rather than a design flaw. At 190 grams on the bracelet, it surprises people who weren't expecting the heft. But the bracelet is swappable. The heft is part of why it feels like something real on the wrist. And the clasp, once you've replaced it, you stop thinking about it entirely. The SD1970 is the answer to a question the watch industry never wanted consumers to ask. How much of what I'm paying for is the watch? And how much is the name? For $77 to $85, you can find out. Here's the thing about every watch on this list. None of them are trying to be luxury watches. They're not attempting to sit at the same table as Rolex or Omega. They're doing something different. They're proving that the materials and engineering behind the experience are more accessible than the industry has spent decades convincing people they are. The brands charging $1,000 for these specifications aren't selling you a better watch in every technical sense. They're selling you the comfort of paying $1,000. The weight of a receipt that says you belong somewhere. There's a version of the watch world where that comfort is worth every cent, and there is a version where it's the most expensive story you ever told yourself. These 10 watches exist for people who want to figure out which version they're in before they spend the money. Any of these watches catch your eye? Drop the name in the comments. Like this video and subscribe if this changed how you think about what you're actually paying for.